Today we take a look at this cheap Amazon or eBay handbrake. Now I say cheap because the next step up from this would be a Thrustmaster one or a Fanatic one, and then you go up even more in price. It's not actually that cheap. I think you can get them for about 60 notes on eBay and a fraction more on Amazon, so still not cheap. I kind of bought this just really for fun because I was wondering, you know, I made a DIY handbrake on my rig a couple of years ago, probably 3 years ago now, because I like to rally. And I was just like, a lot of us can't afford or can't justify spending £150, £180, £240 on just a handbrake. You know, that is a lot of money to spend on one accessory. If maybe the rest of your rig is a Playseat Challenge or a GT Omega cockpit, you know, one of the lower sort of entry-level ones, maybe you're running a Logitech wheel, you know, the G920, G923, or perhaps one of the lower end Thrustmaster ones, you know, a TX or a T300. You don't want to spend, you know, almost as much again on just a handbrake, and you probably can't afford to and probably can't justify it. But if you're into your dirt rally or you're drifting, you want and you need a handbrake. So I thought I'd just grab one of these and give them a go. They are obviously made in the East, designed, you know, somewhere probably over in China by the Chinese. I had someone say to me in the comments the other day, something along the lines of, he didn't like the fact that I referenced cheap stuff as being Chinese. And whilst pointing out that a lot of high-end stuff is also made in China, which of course is completely true. You know, most stuff is manufactured in the East. But, you know, good quality stuff is designed, prototyped and tested elsewhere in the world by the bigger manufacturers. When I say cheap Chinese product, what I mean is something that's been designed and built by a Chinese company at a very low budget, you know, to sell at a much lower price than something else from one of the bigger manufacturers, and that's often very poor quality. This is what I mean by cheap Chinese stuff. I'm not having a go at the Chinese, obviously. But that is what we have here. And the thing is, they've filled a spot in the market that needed filling, really. So is it any good, is the main question you want to know. The answer is, for the money, compared to what else you can buy that's a lot more, yeah, it's all right, actually. It does the job. You plug it in, it's obviously USB. You plug it, this is a braided cable, actually, and it doesn't feel too bad. The connection on the end, again, doesn't feel as cheap as some other items I've had in the past. It plugs in, Windows recognises it as an Arduino, and you go into the control panel and you can calibrate it, or you can just check that it functions. I think it operates on the Z axis, I believe, something like that. It's not important anyway. But yes, it works just fine. The only thing, and then again, when you load up, say, Dirt Rally, for example, it shows up in there. You set it to handbrake, and you can calibrate it in the game as well to make sure the travel, you know, is as it should be. Now, on that note, I had a big dead zone when I first plugged this in. I could move it a reasonable distance before anything happened, before it registered. And what I realised was this bolt here, this one at the end, if you screw it in, it pulls the handbrake more this way, and I just screwed that in until it registered movement on the control panel, and then I just backed it off like half a turn. That way, as soon as I grabbed the handbrake and applied a little bit of pressure, it started to register on the meter. So if you do buy one of these, just make sure you do that, because otherwise your first sort of 20% of your travel won't actually register any input. And if those of you out there might be saying, well, you just yank it fully hard to lock up the wheels anyway, Carl, go check out another one of my videos where I explain why you don't always want to do that, and why having an analog handbrake, which is what this actually is, it's got a hall sensor in there, versus just an on and off handbrake, you know, 0 or 100%, is actually very, very useful depending what type of surface you're racing on. But yeah, so there was that dead zone, so I got rid of that by adjusting this middle bolt here. What's interesting is the actual sort of chassis of this handbrake is just like a cheap eBay or Amazon drift handbrake with the master cylinder fitment, which would be here, just blanked off with this metal plate. This top and bottom bolt here is actually where a Girling or a Wilwood master cylinder would be bolted on, and then there'd be a rod that goes through the middle here. There's actually quite a big hole behind this that would connect to the bottom of the handbrake, and then you'd have your hydraulic pipes running off. So all they've done is got a cheap eBay and Amazon hydraulic handbrake, not fitted a master cylinder, and instead underneath this fake carbon fibre, this is just literally like, you can even see here on the end there, some of the carbon fibre wrap has come off. So it's just I think it is metal, but it's not carbon fibre. Underneath here, and you might even see it in there. Can you make out the white hot glue? I think you can make out the white hot glue in there. That is where the Arduino board is just glued on the underside of this plate in place. And it looks like there is a little piece of metal in here that goes past the hall sensor to give it the reading as you pull it. But you know, it's cheap, but it works, and there's a lot of hot glue in there, so I can't imagine it's going to fall off anytime soon, but we don't know. Obviously I haven't had it that long. So yeah, that isn't carbon fibre. There's an Arduino in there. It is analog. It is a Hall effect sensor. They claim it's 14 or 16-bit. I don't know, I haven't bothered checking the raw data to verify, but there's a reasonable sweep when you pull the handbrake, more than enough to do what you need to do. So that's that side of things. The actual construction is, I'm going to guess, aluminium. I haven't checked it with a magnet, but it's quite light. So aluminium, it's reasonably thick. You know, all the sides, the base here, everything's quite chunky, which is, you know, and the handle itself, again, can't really complain. The only thing I will say is this top bit here is a little bit short. I don't have the biggest hands in the world, and yet if I grasp it, it almost completely disappears. It's not a problem, it works just fine, but maybe if you've got shovels for hands, you might find your finger perhaps clearing the top when it might not otherwise do on a larger handbrake. Maybe, I guess, see, the example of being made for the Chinese there, they've all got small hands because Chinese are small. So maybe that's why it is. You've also got a reasonable amount of adjustment here. You can undo these two bolts that are here, and there's a whole array of other holes and slots, so you can put it that way and put the handle in the top if you want to pull it vertically. If you have it this way, you can do it that way. It's a reasonable amount of adjustment. I actually fitted this to a Playseat Challenge to test this out. Again, I'm thinking about the sort of application, the sort of customer that might buy one. I'll put a picture of that up in a minute, actually, with it fitted. And for me, it fitted in a similar location to what we would all be used to handbrakes being in, unless you happen to have a drift car with a vertical hydro handbrake. Most of us are used to our handbrakes being down the side of the chair there. And the way I fitted this to the Playseat was really quick and easy, and I'll do a video on that as well, just to show people. It was perfect. It was just below the shifter, and I could just drop the hand from the shifter down to the handbrake and pull it on, and it worked really well. So construction's half decent for the money. There's a reasonable thickness of material here. The Hall effect sensor and the Arduino board seem to work just fine, plug and play. The handle is a little shorter at the top here than I'd like. We've got, this is quite funny actually, we've got this little red piece here which swings around. What that does is it enables you to put the handbrake on, and again, this is from where this originally was a hydraulic handbrake for drift cars in real life. That is what you use to hold the handbrake on if you replace your real handbrake in your car. If you replace the cable one with just a hydro handbrake and you want to use it as a traditional handbrake to stop your car rolling away, that's what you do. You pull it on and you clip that up there, and it obviously keeps the rear brakes, the rear brake calipers squeezed onto the discs. So no need for that in sim racing, really. None of us pull up somewhere and park our sim race vehicles. But again, it's just still there from where they've bought these in, from wherever they've got them from, and then just added the Arduino and the Hall effect sensor. So that's quite funny to see, but it's there nonetheless. So the only real negative about this, I would say, aside from the fact that, you know, in reality, they could probably still make a profit at 30 quid instead of 50 or 60 quid because it is cheap. The only other negative I would say is it's really noisy, and I haven't demonstrated this yet, but I'm about to. Take a listen to this. So it is super noisy. Now, there is a very easy way to cure this. The reason it's noisy is because we haven't got nice bronze oil impregnated bearings for any of the moving parts. It's literally just steel pins, or it could be aluminium pins with circlips on the end, and nuts and bolts. So there is metal on metal and it's dry. What I would recommend everyone that buys one of these do is just undo this main bolt that goes through here that it hinges on. Pop this little pin out here. It's just a circlip. You just pop it off with a screwdriver. And then these two bolts here, one this side and one this side, they slide backwards and forwards as it moves. Take them all out, get some grease and grease them all up. Not only should that shut up the noise, it will stop it gradually wearing away the aluminium. I mean, it would take a while, obviously, because there isn't that much pressure being put on them. But yeah, grease it all up. It will shut it up and it will make it last a bit longer. You know, its operation feels quite smooth, even though it's noisy as hell. But yeah, grease it all up and you'll find that'll be a lot better. The only other thing I might say, and this is going to be a personal preference, is the strength of the spring. I'm not going to move that again because it's noisy. Yeah, the spring inside there is lighter than I would like, but then I'm used to running, you know, a very solid rig. If you are on something like a Playseat Challenge or one of the entry-level perhaps GT Omega Art or Pro cockpits that aren't quite as solid, unless you brace them up like I did mine, you might actually prefer a handbrake that is a little easier to pull, because otherwise your playseat or your cockpit might start twisting around or wobbling a little bit. So the strength of the spring is definitely going to be personal preference. If you're buying this to mount on a rig that's pretty solid, then you can just change the spring. The easiest way to do it is take the original spring out, measure its length and its diameter, and just go on eBay or Amazon or wherever the hell you want and find springs of a similar size, length and diameter, and just find the heaviest one you can. But basically, I can't give you a poundage rating to buy, because I haven't bought a load and tested them. But they're probably only going to be a few quid a spring. So you could buy 3 springs, all different poundage ratings, get like a really heavy one. Like for example, a valve spring, an uprated valve spring in a Z-Tech engine, because I tune cars for a living, would be like 220 foot-pounds, maybe. Foot-pounds, 220 pounds of pressure. And I used one of those valve springs on my DIY handbrake, and for me that was perfect. Actually, I suppose you could use that as a reference point. For me, 220 pounds was spot on. The original ones, I believe, are 180 pounds, just to give you an example of the difference. This, I couldn't begin to guess what this is, but like a valve spring from a head, I can't compress with my fingers, whereas this, I'm sure I certainly could. But yeah, that would be the thing to do. If you want a heavier spring, take it out, measure its length, measure its diameter, and perhaps buy 3 springs, maybe buy a £100 spring, a £150 spring, and a £200 spring, and then you can just try which one and see what you like. They're only going to be a few quid each. But aside from that, you know, I actually think it does a job. And if you don't want to spend a bucket, you know, if you don't want to spend another £100 plus for the Thrustmaster one, the Fanatic one, and then going up the ladder, I can't really see why you wouldn't be happy with this. Slap some grease on it to shut it up, and if you want to uprate the spring, uprate the spring. But yeah, I actually think it's half decent for, you know, for the money and for what else is out there. It definitely does the job. So I'll bung a link in the description, eBay and Amazon. As I say, the eBay ones are a little bit cheaper than the Amazon ones, so if you're worried about saving an extra few pound, go to the eBay link instead. But yeah, I actually give it a thumbs up. I think it's all right. And if, you know, this will go on my Playseat Challenge and it will stay there, I imagine, because if I want to do some multiplayer, I don't know, Need for Speed Underground, like me and Kate have done before, we want to do some drifting and some handbrake turns, why would you not want one on there? Anyway, that's it for today, I think. Thanks very much for watching as always. Grab yourself a cheapo handbrake if you want one. And as always, take it easy.